Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the celebration of the life of the late South African anti-apartheid campaigner Ahmed Kathrada features scathing condemnation of President Jacob Zuma. He says he was asked not to attend the funeral. Kathrada's foundation said that they only told him he couldn't speak. Also, activists raised questions about the quality of the trial against Ivory Coast's former First Lady. Simone Gbagbo was acquitted on charges of crimes against humanity on Tuesday. And Madagascar commemorates a painful period of its history, the 70th anniversary of the bloody uprising against French rule, in which around 40,000 Malagasy were killed as settlers put down the insurgency. But first, in South Africa, anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Kathrada's funeral took on an overtly political tone on Wednesday as mourners celebrated the values that he stood for. There was a fiery eulogy that called out the leadership of the country, condemnation amplified by the absence of President Jacob Zuma, who, in contradiction to what Kathrada's foundation said, claims that he was asked to stay away.
Hundreds of people attended the funeral of Ahmed Kathrada, but not President Jacob Zuma, even though they were both from the ANC. Zuma said the family had asked him to stay away, but the Kathrada Foundation said it just didn't want him to give a speech. Last year, Ahmed Kathrada wrote a letter to Zuma asking him to step down. Zuma has been accused of corruption and of failing to improve the lives of black South Africans. Ahmed Kathrada was known to be a straight-talking activist.
Comrade Kathy was never a silent man throughout his life of 87 years. So we are also here to celebrate his life because Uncle Kathy always made his views known.
Pravin Gordhan was given a standing ovation. On Monday, Zuma had ordered the respected finance minister to return early from a trip, fueling speculation he might want to replace him with a loyalist. Some of Kathrada's friends, like former President Kgalema Motlanthe, were among those who also transformed the funeral into a rally against Jacob Zuma.
It would be disingenuous to pay tribute to the life of Comrade Ahmed Kathrada and pretend that he was not deeply disturbed by the current post-apartheid failure of politics.
Ahmed Kathrada was one of Nelson Mandela's closest friends. They were both among 8 ANC activists sentenced to life imprisonment in 1964. Kathrada was released in 1989 after having spent 26 years of his life in jail.
Well, for more on this, Tim Butcher joins us, telling us about the political theatre played out at Kathrada's funeral.
In the last few days, Mr. Zuma has dared to move against the finance minister. And when he does that, it has an immediate effect on the economy here. The currency tanks, the cost of borrowing, the government borrowing goes through the roof, and suddenly there's a fiscal cost, there's an actual monetary cost. So basically what we saw today was a deep division in the cabinet. It split, basically, right down the middle, pro-Zuma and anti-Zuma. So I think we're in very, very delicate waters here for the ANC and for the post-apartheid South Africa. We've never had it. It's so fraught. We're having, every time, every minute that goes by, people are watching the currency markets here, watching the rand as it goes down, it goes up slightly. What's going to happen to the finance minister? It is febrile times here in South Africa. Quite remarkable to see a funeral of a man who was, frankly, royalty in this country. Ahmed Kathrada might not be a household name around the world, but in this country, he is royalty. He stood alongside, shoulder to shoulder with Nelson Mandela at the Rivonia trial. To see his funeral so overtly politicized was quite remarkable.
So Zuma, as you mentioned, they're clearly attracting more criticism this week by going after Gordhan. Speculation that he's trying to edge him out. Do we have any clearer idea as to what Gordhan's fate might be?
Well, we know this, is that if it had been easy for him to remove the finance minister, it would have happened by now. The guillotine would have dropped. But it hasn't, and the fact it hasn't, and it's drawn out for some days, shows how senior members of the ANC, not just guys on the street level, we're talking very senior level, Treasury, Secretary General, Vice President of the whole party, are actually challenging Zuma. So at the moment, It's hanging in the air. Tonight, we've had a very unpleasant whiff. We've had the Zuma side putting out that Mr. Godin is implicated in some dodgy intelligence report of treasonous activities. Treason in South Africa, a finance minister. All he was doing was going to London and America, asking investors to back this country, to trust the currency, the rand, and to invest their money. And yet there's a whiff here of desperation about Mr. Zuma. So I'm not wondering if we're not entering the end game for Mr. Zuma rather than the end game for his finance minister.
Tim Butcher there for us in Cape Town. Well, rights activists have questioned the quality of the process against Ivory Coast's former First Lady before she was acquitted on charges of crimes against humanity on Tuesday. Simone Gbagbo has been accused over her alleged role in post-electoral violence that broke out in the country in late 2010. Arnaud Froger tells us more.
Rights organizations are as stunned as disappointed by this verdict. The acquittal of Simone Gbagbo for crimes against humanity reflects the many irregularities in the process against her and leaves many unanswered serious questions about her alleged role in the crimes committed during the 2011 post-election crisis, said Human Rights Watch today. 6 years ago, indeed, the violence between supporters from former President Laurent Gbagbo and newly elected President Alassane Ouattara left Côte d'Ivoire with at least 3,000 people killed. And according to Ibrahim Koulibaly, a lawyer in the local rights organization, Ivorian justice really failed to shed light on Simone Gbagbo's presumed involvement in the Ivorian civil war.
Our justice system didn't have the will to hold a fair trial that could have led to the determination of the truth. It's a missed opportunity for us because reconciliation cannot be achieved without justice. This was an opportunity to clarify who did what to whom during that troubled time in our country.
Simone Gbagbo is kept in jail as she's still serving a 20-year prison term for endangering state security. And she might not even be done with Ivorian justice yet, with a potential third trial to come for economic crimes.
One of the least known massacres of French colonial history was commemorated in Madagascar on Wednesday, the 70th anniversary of the Malagasy uprising. Around 40,000 people were killed in the French settlers' war against the insurgents. Our correspondent revisited the community where the revolt broke out.
It was in this quiet town of about 30,000 people, 100 kilometres east of the capital, that things took a revolutionary turn. On the 29th of March 1947, while French settlers were enjoying a Saturday night in the city, thousands of Malagasy armed with spears attacked these barracks in the dead of night. This man was 17 at the time. He was a bodyguard and carried talismans for the fighters. The memories of the raid are still fresh in his mind.
We started marching slowly, in complete silence, in single file, armed with spears. Our bodies were hunched over, like this, slowly marching. The settlers didn't have time to prepare. They were all with their women. That's why we won. We waited for them to arrive. We were ready, and then we killed.
The bloodshed marked the beginning of a popular uprising against forced labour and the increasingly unbearable abuse the Malagasy suffered under colonial rule.
We carried the district chief, the forest guards, the officials on chairs, like slaves.
Imprisonment, torture and mass killings ensued. For 2 years, the settlers violently repressed the uprising and the rebels were forced to back down.
We hid in the forest overnight. If we'd lit a fire during the daytime, the planes flying overhead would have fired at us with rockets. We suffered injuries all over our bodies, and our clothes were all ripped up.
The Malagasy who fought for the French during the rebellion were branded traitors. Some who battled against their own people were later racked with guilt, and the country still struggles with trauma caused by the uprising. 70 years later, and for many, discussing it is still taboo.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
You love watching France 24 in English.
Analysis from France 24. I'm Mark Owen. These are the main world news.
To the border with Algeria.
Huge lines since this morning to answer that question. But France 24 is also available in French.
14h à Paris, bonjour à tous, bienvenue si vous nous rejoignez sur France 24 préparez-vous.
And Arabic.
شعبية هذا الباب القادم من أمريكا الجنوبية في ازدياد
Also coming up.
Featured on cable and satellite systems and online media in France and across the world.